it could not be more different on WPT Global. You can win so much more. If you're that demographic, the kind of experienced player who's willing to give action and can adapt to these kind of like high ante, high blind game conditions, you would do really, really well.
All right, what's up, everybody? Today, you guys may have heard of the big companies, GG Poker, PokerStars, all that. And you may know of this company. It's also, this poker site is pretty big too. And this company and the CEO of this company are thinking of taking on GG Poker and PokerStars and all those guys with the experience of the old PokerStars, the old Full Tilt, microgaming, and more, and the ambition to match. Alex Scott's entering, and he's got changes for the poker world that are going to benefit you. What's up, Alex? Would you agree with everything I've said?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi.
Just making sure. All right, we are still taking on the big boys, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is what I've been trying to do ever since I left PokerStars and Full Tilt back in the day. Is I've been trying to build something else to be a compelling alternative to the big boys. So I'm really pleased to be somewhere where you have the genuine opportunity to do that.
All right, cool. Yeah, I played on your site. I've noticed some changes, but I haven't noticed everything. There's a number of features that we'll go into. I've noticed definitely the changes in formats, which is what I thought would be necessary so that it really screws up a lot of the people who have perfect sims and all that are studying the shit out of this like one format that's done across all sites. No rake with a typical rake structure, or excuse me, not no rake, no ante with typical rake structure, boring ass format. Instead, we've got like multiple blinds and different structures and what is it? Bomb pots. Some sites have bomb pots, but a bunch of different things were going on. And I thought, well, okay, so yeah, WPT is doing some funny things. Okay, this is interesting. It's got some games in Chinese currency as well for some reason. We were talking the other day, and you're telling me some more things going on. Why don't you tell me what WPT's got cooking?
Well, I mean, let's talk about the things you just mentioned first of all. So yeah, one key thing is that when we launched, one of the things that gave us a chance of success was the fact that we joined this established poker network, and it was an Asia-facing poker network. So it gave us the starting point that we needed to enter this industry as a brand new startup online poker site. We've seen a couple of people try, and they always struggle with the same issue, which is where do you find your first players? Where do you build that critical mass? And it's very difficult to do. But joining this poker network, which is why we have Chinese currency tables, by the way, is one of the things that helped us to establish ourselves and grow and be successful. The other thing you pointed out is, we're an action poker room, right? There's a lot of money going into the pot pre-flop in our no limit hold'em games. Most of them have 3 blinds. Most of them also have an ante. So they're action games. And if you're a nit, these aren't the games for you. We're not the site for you if you're a nit, frankly. I'm just gonna emphasize, like, we're an action poker site, and there's a lot that we do actually to encourage action and to keep the games fun and fair and sustainable, which we can talk about later in the podcast.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I wondered why sites were doing that. I never understood why sites had to have games with no ante. That's a strange thing to me. And then your games have like big antes and like, I mean, I don't know if it's the case of lower stakes too, but I played at higher stakes where it would be like a 1K ante and a RMB ante and a 400 blind, 200, 400 blind. It's goofy as shit. But if you're doing that at smaller stakes, I've never seen that one before. That's gonna punish nits massive. If nits are really screwing around with that.
And look, if I'm completely honest, I don't think there's a single poker site out there that really wants to cater to that nit demographic anymore. It might have been the case in the olden days, but now we all recognise that we need a sustainable ecosystem. We need to support recreational players, give them a chance to succeed, give them a positive early experience, and the players that are willing to help us with that, the players that contribute to that, action atmosphere, they're the ones that will do really well. So if you're a pro who can adapt those game conditions, you will do exceptionally well in WPT Global. And again, we can actually come to that because I know you spoke to Mobius Poker in an earlier podcast. I was watching that earlier today, and he spoke about the win rates that good regs achieve on sites like GG and Stars. It could not be more different on WPT Global. You can win so much more. If you're that demographic, the kind of experienced player who's willing to give action and can adapt to these kind of like high ante, high blind game conditions, you would do really, really well.
For the viewers to imagine this, for at least the example that I gave to make it more visual, it would be 200, 400 blinds, since 1K ante each for each player. So now there's six. Like if there's 6 players, there's $4,000 in the pot. If there's a third blind, which there often is on WPT Global, it would be 200, 400, 800 plus. Like there would be, I mean, in this case, it'd be 1K each, but it'd still be like ridiculous. But often for 200, 400, 800, it would be, I think, something like 1,600 in the middle, something like that, 1,200 in the middle. There's quite a bit of antes basically, and it's a different structure for these particular games, and the typical sims won't really cut it because this structure is just not the same as what you see on GG Poker or a lot of other places. It's not so stereotypical, and at least gives a different outlet for a lot of what's going on. And we were talking about the ecology the other day because it does look like, at least in these formats, VIPs, or excuse me, higher win rates are possible. There's also a different system I've noticed where I'm actually starting to like the system. Another site that I'm supporting, AA Poker, is using a certain version of the system where they charge people to let people see cards and for time. I know you guys are doing that, and like that way the rake is sort of different, is my understanding, and you're using a different way of organizing the players. We were talking about this the other day. You mentioned the ecology that is organizing the players within roughly their demographic, if that's right. Why don't we talk about those couple of things?
Yeah, let's talk about this. So I guess the first point I want to get across is that AI, artificial intelligence, right? It's very, very topical and popular right now, but our business has been built on it for years, actually. So way before you started hearing about AI and Chat GPT and stuff like that, we've been using AI for a couple of really interesting things. The first thing relates to the ecology, right? And it's about how do we ensure that we have sustainable games in the long term? How do we ensure that players can have a positive experience, that they can win more than they can anywhere else? And it's about how you organize the games, how you distribute your player pool across the tables. So if you just put yourself in the mindset, let's say you're organizing a private game. Let me ask you this question, actually. You're going to organize a private game. What kind of players would you invite if you wanted that game to go on as long as possible?
I would invite players that well, there'd be a lot of variables, right? But I would try to invite players that, I mean, you'd want, obviously, the biggest VIPs possible. You'd want, other than that, probably not people that are crushing too much, especially if they intimidate too much. That's actually kind of worse than them actually winning a lot. It's more important factor. It makes more sense why I don't get invited to too many games. I'm like, damn it, I can't play that angle. And if I didn't have the option of having really big VIPs, I would have a lot of players kind of in the same vicinity. I think, because then they would argue about who's better, and they wouldn't really know, and there wouldn't be too much. Yeah, there wouldn't be too much like dodging, and there'd be more gambling and that sort of thing.
So I think you touched on some really important things that relate to exactly what we're doing. So first of all, you said you need to invite some VIPs to the game, and you're absolutely right because
well, ideally,
but a game that's only pros is not going to last very long. Pros don't generally want to play under those conditions, right? Pros play together for different reasons. They play for competition. Maybe at the end of a tournament you end up in a position where a bunch of pros are playing together, but generally you're organising a private game, you're not going to invite only pros to it. You mentioned something else, which is you mentioned intimidation. So this is something that kind of applies more live than online, but you're looking for people with social skills, right? People that make it a fun game to play. If poker's a unique game, well, maybe not unique, but it's different from many other casino games in the sense that you can change the value of the people around you. You have a direct impact on the players around you. You can scare them away, or you can make them feel welcome. You can give them a good time, and so when you organise your perfect private game, you're actually looking for people that bring that bring some fun to the game and bring social skills, right? And then you also touched on not too much skill disparity in the game. If you've got a couple of really, really terrible players and then a couple of really, really great players, then the money is going to flow very, very quickly from the terrible players to the great players, and the game won't last very long. So you need some way of measuring that skill disparity, managing that skill disparity between the players. So what we do using AI, we have a system called Fair Game. And what it does is it very quickly ascertains the skill level of players playing in our cash games using a machine learning model, which is a form of AI for people who are not too familiar with the idea. So we measure the skill level of every player, and then we essentially categorize you in one of 6 categories. We can simplify it to be casual players and pros, right? Broadly speaking, casual players and pros. And the idea is to ensure the right balance of casual players and pros at each table. So if you have no pros at all, then tables don't start as easily and they don't survive as long. The principle of Fair Game is that we reserve a certain number of the seats at the table for casual players. And then the remaining, so most of our tables are 8-handed. This is the tables that people just prefer to play on our network, which is a little bit different to most other sites actually. Most of our tables are 8-handed. So we reserve 6 of the seats for casual players or recreational players, which leaves 2 remaining that can be occupied by pro players. And it's about establishing this perfect balance, right? We believe that for most of our games, that balance of 6 recreationals and 2 pros means that the game it lasts as long as possible and is as sustainable as possible, but it also ensures the best experience for everybody at that table. So we're not completely segregating the player pools from each other. I want to make that clear, right? So if you're a pro, you always have a table to sit at any given stake. It's just that you will need to start tables more often if you're a pro. Once you do start a table, though, there can only be one other pro that sits at that table with you. One of the problems that our industry has, right, the poker industry as a whole has this problem, and it's getting worse, is as a new player, I can sign, like somebody who's barely played online poker, barely knows the rules. I can sign up to GG or Stars, and I can sit down at a table, and I will probably be playing against 7 or 8 really experienced, really strong, expert opponents, probably. And in that circumstance, I'm very unlikely to win. In fact, I'm probably going to have a really poor experience. And when that happens, they just leave and never come back. They never play online poker again. And this is a huge problem for our industry because we rely on new players coming in all the time. And it's also a problem in terms of growing our industry because we've got enormous, very successful casino and betting companies that have no interest in offering poker because they don't want their new players to be exposed to this experience. New players, I take an example of BetVictor, for example. BetVictor is a very big casino and sports book in Europe. And the CEO, I was speaking with him a few years ago, and he said, I would never want new players to go play poker. because they're more likely to win playing slot games or blackjack or roulette.
Yeah, I mean, when you say this is actually, I didn't even realize this, but this makes a lot of sense. Probably new players you don't want to play, you don't want them to play with like people who are better than them or like that much better than them anyway, or it's like they've gotten a shot.
It's very common for new players to have a bad experience, and when they do, they don't come back. They're gone, and they now are taking their entertainment dollars and they're spending it on something completely different that's not poker. Because you got to remember, we are competing for somebody's disposable income, and we're competing with everything else that they might do with that. Netflix or video games, or any other form of gambling, or whatever. We're literally competing against every other form of entertainment.
Yeah. You make a valid point. There has to be some kind of way to position poker so that it's more attractive of a possibility than these other options for these recreational players. At the least to be, and that's actually very difficult. I mean, it's not that simple a problem to solve, but definitely what you're onto with pairing them with other novices or whatever. I mean, do you get 7 recreationals for every pro? Like, I mean, how are you doing this?
So we have a machine learning model which predicts the win rate of every player, and it does it pretty quickly. It does it within a couple of hours of gameplay for the most part. And it becomes increasingly reliable and increasingly accurate the more hands you play on WPT Global. And like I said, it will categorize you either as, broadly speaking, a casual player or a pro. It's a little bit more complex than that. I don't want to get into all of the detail because this is a proprietary system. But if you're categorized as a casual player or you're uncategorized, then you get to play at every single table. And if you're categorized as a pro, you can still play every single type of game and every single type of stake. It's just that when the 2 pro seats are already occupied at a table, you're going to have to find another table or wait for one to become available. So what we incentivize there is we incentivize pros to start more games, which is one of the things that one of the services that pros provide to the ecosystem. Nobody's saying here that pros are all bad, by the way. Pros have a really important role to play in online poker. The game is a lot less sustainable without any pros. If you invented a theoretical poker site where everyone's a fish, that poker site wouldn't make as much money. The games wouldn't be as sustainable as if you added just the right number of pros into the mix. So what we see is that when there are no pros at all, games don't start as often because recreational players are very averse to playing under those conditions. Very averse to playing short-handed game conditions.
Oh, really?
And they prefer to play at tables that are mostly full. So as soon as you get down to, say, let's say it's an 8-handed or 9-handed table, as soon as you get down to 4 players, a lot of recreationals get very uncomfortable and start to leave. The game breaks earlier than it would. Whereas pros are generally more willing to play in game conditions like that, and therefore their presence helps the tables to stay running, where they may otherwise not. So pros also tend to start tables a lot more often than recreational players do. So they play a really important role in starting tables and ensuring that they continue running, which contributes to the sustainability and the longevity of games.
Sure. Okay.
You can also imagine pros play or can play some other important roles as well. Like, many recreational players want to challenge themselves against experienced players. This will have happened to you, I'm sure. Players want to challenge themselves against you, right? And that's part of the poker dream for a lot of people. Is this is a game where you can do that. There's not many other competitive activities where you can. And if you're a fun pro to play against, you can definitely add a lot of value. You can attract people to the game. This is why the Red Pro sort of, what's the word, that system, the Red Pro system at Full Tilt Poker back in the day was so successul. It helped to attract people in. Those tables always filled up really quickly and always had an enormous waiting list, no matter which Red Pro it was, because people wanted to challenge themselves against people like that, and they wanted the experience that they couldn't get somewhere else. So I don't want anybody to take away from this that we are anti-pro or that we're anti-winning player. We're not. We know that winning players and pros have a really important role to play. Our AI system, Fair Game, gives us that perfect balance of pros and recreational players at every table that makes every table much more fun to play at and much more sustainable.
I think the pros are important for a bit of a what's the reason? Something like an important, like I want to say philosophical reason. Well, let's put it this way: if the one of the differences between the casino games and poker is that you can actually win at poker. You can't win at slots where they take 3% every hand, or baccarat. Like you're not supposed to be able to win. But in this case, the system is supposed to be rigged, quote unquote, not rigged, so that you can actually be good enough and play whatever. And if there's no pros at all, then the dream is dead. And then no one can like find a way to like improve and like get there. And not to mention, I mean, if we're going to brand poker as a mind sport, which I think it is, then we have to like have the qualities of a mind sport, which is like you can win, and there's just some element that's like chess. So like if the pros don't exist, none of that exists, and that's kind of the bottom line. And that was like the major difference between, at least for me, I got offered the opportunity to offer slots, etc., and I had to like look deep and within and see, does this make any sense for my brand? And the ultimate answer was no, because so I'm not going to like sponsor slots because like that would be leading people towards destruction, whereas poker does not do that really fundamentally. You have the option to improve yourself and at least use your mind and all that stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think anybody who's taken poker relatively seriously at some stage has thought about being a pro or has aspired to it. I certainly did earlier in my career. I've been playing poker for a long, long time. And I definitely aspired to be pro. In fact, I went around calling myself a semi-pro at one stage when I was in my 20s. But you're absolutely right. That's one of the things that distinguishes poker from any other form of gambling. And poker can be such a positive thing for a person's life. It can teach you really important skills. I've gained so much personally from playing poker. Some of the best friends I met playing poker. Some of the best days and nights I've ever had in my life have revolved around a poker game.
What about the worst nights?
And some of the worst nights too, yeah. and I learned skills. My maths got better as I studied poker. I got better at reading people playing poker because I studied tells, and I studied the sort of the reality of body language and expression, micro expressions and things like that, which is really, really interesting. Poker has taught me a lot, and it's given me a lot. It's given me a whole career and a whole bunch of friends and a lifestyle that I'm very grateful for. Yeah.
Well, it's got a lot of freedom to it. That was the biggest thing that attracted me, and a lot of people. Well, that's a pretty important thing to value. Maybe one of the most important things, which is, I think. I think that's what a lot of, maybe even a lot of the casino games and all that does kind of offers like freedom, and you can do whatever, which is a little bit understated, I think. A big question that I'm thinking of, and this is really, really important for poker, because you mentioned the incentive system is a little bit broken for pros to battle each other. But if the rake's too high, they can't beat each other, and that becomes, where people are supposed to be sharp, they're going to pick up on that real fast.
I think people sometimes get too caught up in the idea of rake, and they don't think about what's more important, which is, can I make money in this game or not? I learned poker strategy and skill mainly from books, right? I'm that generation. Mm-hmm. I read Sklansky and Melmoth and so on. He wrote about game selection versus rake, and he said something along the lines of, he's seen players choose a game based on the fact that it had lower rake than the game across the street, but they didn't consider the fact that the game across the street had much juicier players in it, and actually they could have made a lot more money per hour by playing in the game with higher rake, but
Right.
because they had much higher win rate in that game. You see,
That's possible, yeah,
you
for
see what I'm
sure.
getting at?
Hmm.
So it's that
Yeah.
full picture that's important. It's not just the rate. The rate plays an important role, but so does the quality of the opposition that you're playing against. And what our fair game system does is it basically ensures that every game is a juicy game. And so even though our rake is our rake is comparable to GG, right? But the quality of the games is not at all comparable. We have far juicier games than anyone else, frankly. And so people win a lot more in our games before rewards. So you playing, assume the rake is exactly the same for a second, just for the sake of an illustrative example. Assume the rake is exactly the same between us and GG. It's not quite. There's some differences, but assume that it is. Because our games are so much juicier, you are going to win so much more money playing with WPT Global. And we actually took, the guy you had on a few weeks ago, Mobius Poker. He did some research into how beatable the games were on Stars and GG, and I think he actually found that most regs lose money on GG before rakeback and only win because of rakeback and rewards. Right?
Yeah, sounds right.
On WPT Global, those good regs, we tried to study as closely as possible. We tried to follow his methodology. Those regs are going to win more than 20 big blinds per 100 hands, playing in the same games. That's a lot more.
Wow.
It's a lot more. So fair game makes it much more sustainable. And I'm not saying that this will remain the same forever, because as we grow, we're going to grow in some countries faster than others. We're going to attract some demographics of player faster than others. Maybe it changes. Maybe instead of being 20 BB per 100 today, maybe in a year's time it's 18. It's like party poker all over again in the glory days.
Okay, so what about the spectator sport thing? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, definitely. So we have some ideas. We have a feature coming in the future called Starseed, which will be about
Starseed?
yeah, and it will be about showcasing certain players at certain tables, interesting players at interesting tables, that kind of thing. I don't want to go into too much detail about it because a lot of it is still being discussed, exactly how it will work, exactly how it'll be presented, etc. But the idea is to bring that spectator aspect back to online poker. Now the key thing here is, like, how do we make these games interesting? There needs to be action, right? It can't just be 8 nits folding to each other all the time. There needs to be somebody interesting and charismatic at that table, and there needs to be plenty of action. I think they're two of the factors that make watching a poker game interesting. So combination of interesting
Yeah, I
people,
think so.
a bit of drama. How do we find the right way to present that so that it's interesting for the audience and engages the audience? Because there's so much content out there, man. There's so much you can. You could never possibly watch all of the poker content, right? I used to watch it all. I can't keep up with it now. There's too much. So how do we make our stuff interesting enough so that people genuinely want to seek it out and watch it?
I mean, related, we did talk about this idea that you seemed open to of giving people the option to present their game formats, because it's kind of a similar concept of where why only have a handful of minds figuring out the game formats when this is something that clearly expounds on the game of poker, when you can have as many minds as possible focusing on this from a lot of different places. It seems to be far more powerful than like what ends up being basically a hive mind. If it's like a group of people, it's really hard to like get out of that as like a group of people focusing on it. Or it's not super hard, but difficult, right? To just say, okay, I'm going to go way over there and see what's up over there, and you don't know where where over there is that you really need to focus on. But if you have an incentive structure that lets someone from anywhere pitch something good, and their format can now earn them money or benefit them in some kind of way, now this not only opens up possibilities for the players to make money that do not require them to actually beat poker, which is fucking difficult, especially when like Rick's getting high and all this shit, but also gives you and operators options for like other kinds of games to spread and potentially make money if you can like easily replicate that system. Does that the idea still appeal to you? Do you think you could do that or no?
Yeah, I'm not saying it would be an easy thing to achieve, but I like the idea of players being able to build their own custom game and play it online. It was an idea I had years and years and years ago because I kind of observed that when we added a new game format, like I don't know, we added Five Card Omaha, for example. Generally, that was incremental. It just added revenue. It didn't take away from the games that were already there, and it was kind of like a guaranteed long-term source of revenue. You add a new game format, it attracts new players. It gets more out of existing players. It's just a very easy sell in terms of a new type of feature. So I had the idea that we'd have like a builder where you'd be able to drag things around to build a game. Like for example, you could say, okay, it's a Hold'em style game, and I'm going to deal 3 cards to begin with to each player. Then you drag into the builder. You drag a betting round. Then you drag. We're going to deal 3 cards as a flop. There's going to be another betting round, and now you drag another thing into the game builder, which is now I'm going to give the player another whole card. And then you drag another betting round into the builder, and then okay, it's a showdown, and it's going to use these hand rankings to determine the winner. And you create this game, and it becomes a shareable game that you can share with the community. Other players who are interested in playing these kind of interesting, weird, mixed games, whatever, they can search through this library of games that have been created by the community, and they can use them for their own games, their own private games. They can use them in a mixed game, whatever it might be. So one of my favorite ways of playing poker is like that. When you're playing a home game or you're playing a private game and you're just making stuff up, some weird games with wild cards, and it's going to be high-low. We've played games like there's an elevator where the middle card can move up and down between. We've played some really weird stuff over the years, but they're so much fun. Games like that are so much fun, and to be able to bring that experience of making stuff up on the spot, bringing that online, it's difficult to do in a way that would be simple to use. But I think if you got it right, it would be a really interesting game concept.
I think a good topic would be game integrity also, because I understand you're making some strides there, and there seems to be more hope for players in that realm. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, game integrity is one of the most interesting areas of online poker. It's something that I've worked in pretty much my whole career. So my first job out of university was with PokerStars. And I started in the customer support team there, and I, as part of the role, was looking into collusion cases, and sort of later got trained on the bot detection tools as well. So I've worked in game integrity for a really long time, and I've seen it evolve. And so I would kind of characterize it as an arms race, right? Because the online poker site has a really strong incentive to police the games, make the games safe, right? Not a foolproof incentive, and we can talk about that later if you want, but a strong incentive, particularly for things like collusion. And we in those early days we were really concerned about collusion. We did a lot of work to prevent it, to deter people from trying to collude in the first place. We built a whole bunch of tools and really invested in people and training and everything to make it to make collusion go away, and it pretty much did. This is one of the things that people don't realize. Like the games today, you can't get away with colluding at any kind of scale. Like you can't cause significant damage on a reputable online poker site by colluding now. It's just too easy to catch. The game changer was big data. Prior to big data and the ability to analyze big data, collusion was an arms race. Then as soon as we got big data, it just became instantly obvious. And once we got big data and we found the right way to interrogate it, it became instantly obvious who was colluding and who wasn't. Right. So it's kind of like a solved problem now. I challenge anybody to get away with colluding at scale on Stars or WPT Global. So we've changed our focus. We're now concerned about different things, and actually the thing that's been concerning people like me in poker for the last sort of 5 to 10 years maybe is what we first called push this button bots. So obviously we've had the concept of bots around for a long time. Bots take the decision for you and they take the action for you, right? So you leave them undisturbed and they just do
RTA basically.
Yeah, exactly,
right.
RTA.
It's very similar.
RTA it's the same concept. The decision is being made for you, but there's a human at the controls. So our early bot detection efforts relied on being able to distinguish between a human at the controls and a machine at the controls. And we did a lot of stuff to distinguish the two. Some technical stuff and other stuff. But as soon as you put a human at the controls, all of that goes out of the window. You can't rely on that anymore. So it became a more difficult challenge. Now, luckily, in the early days, RTA was really bad. Like, the very first RTA was really weak tight and would give you terrible advice that would cause you to lose. So why would you use it, right? And generally, like people who did use it, they experimented with it and very quickly found it was terrible and didn't continue using it. So it wasn't a threat, didn't really cause any damage. But today, RTA, with advances in GTO and solver technology and stuff like that, even a couple of years ago, it wasn't really feasible to run a lot of GTO simulations in real time quickly enough to be able to tell the player what to do. The technology wasn't powerful enough to be able to respond quickly enough to give you the decision in time to take the action at the table, right? But now that is possible. It's possible both locally and it's possible using pre-solved databases online. And
I have a question about that, and we'll get into the defenses against that. But I know actually a little secret that I will not reveal now because it's meant to be confidential. But there's one major player that is going to really knock out a lot of RTAs pretty savagely. But I want to ask the question: what are the methods people are using for RTA and things like that? And for the record, I do think that RTAing is technically cheating. It's not the worst kind of cheating, obviously, but it definitely is worth the relatively severe penalty, especially if someone is caught, because it's very hard to catch. Kind of a parabolic penalty should be like some kind of major fee or something. But I want to, you said people use lots of databases or something. I would presume that people use like the major solvers and stuff as my guess and just have like a laptop open, like, because, commonsensically thinking, how the f do you catch that? But do you guys have some insight on what people do? Do you even like maybe just some of the basic methods that are a little bit more obvious and if they're preventable?
Yeah, so the most entry level way to use an RTA while you're playing would be to just use a solver. And I don't want to name any particular solver because some of them are very cooperative and are trying to help us with this problem. I'm not saying this is a solved problem. This is where the arms race is today, right? So the arms race has moved on from collusion, and it's moved on from bots as well, actually, for the most part. And RTA is the cutting edge of game integrity today. And the most interesting part of the arms race today. But yeah, like if you're an entry-level cheater and you want to use the RTA, then the typical way to do that would be to find a solver, familiarize yourself with using it, and then enter into the solver difficult situations that came up as you played. Now, obviously, you're going to rely on a lot of assumptions and things like that. But that's entry-level way. There are obviously much more sophisticated ways to use RTA. I'm aware of at least one group that was able to use pre-solved scenarios. So instead of solving the situation on the fly, which is very resource intensive and slow, they would look up the most analogous similar situation in a database online and get the result in, say.
Is there a way to prevent against that? Because, at some point, I just want to throw this out there. At some point, you would think like the person who's like investing a lot in cheating and trying to get better and better at cheating would think like, what if I just got like really good at playing? I think because that's a lot of work too. Like go down the rabbit hole of cheating and be like, and try to come up with all these sophisticated methods. Why don't I just like get good? Like beat things normally. You know what I mean? That's one thing I think is funny because they have to get more and more sophisticated. But I'm curious if there's defenses against these kinds of things because I know that some of the at least the basic methods are going to get at some point.
For sure. Have you ever played backgammon? Are you a backgammon player?
I played it a little bit. I played like yeah, I played it a little bit. I know there's like a pure total solve for that.
Yeah. So the story with backgammon is backgammon went through a brief explosion online, and at the same time, solvers became a thing in backgammon. Very similar time. So the most famous solver in backgammon was called Snowy, and there was another one, a GNU BG it was called, which was open source and like ridiculously hard to use. And that. But Snowy was very popular. So what happened in backgammon was the explosion happened online, the explosion in solvers happened at the same time, and the backgammon sites couldn't fight quickly enough to save the game. So the game of backgammon has pretty much died out online. It's still there, but it's very niche. Nobody's really playing it for significant money. There's no enormous, multi-billion-dollar backgammon sites like there used to be. So backgammon failed to defend itself against real-time assistance. Poker must defend itself against real-time assistance now, otherwise it won't be here in 5 years' time. Not anything like it is today, at least. This is probably the biggest threat to our game that there has ever been.
Really?
Shit. Now, I don't want. Some of this is really, really sensitive and confidential, so I don't want to get into too much detail about it. But there is one thing. This is like one tool in the toolbox, which is very analogous to the backgammon situation that they basically came up with too late in the game. So what they did was the backgammon side started solving every game because Snowy would always solve a position in the game the same way. In backgammon's a much simpler game. You don't have to make the same assumptions about what your opponent may do. You just assume your opponent's playing GTO as well, and there is one choice which is clearly better than the others usually. So these just solved every game and compared each player's actions against Snowy and GNU BG and looked for similarities. So if you saw somebody who was constantly making the same move as Snowy, well, they were obviously using Snowy for advice, right?
Right.
So backgammon's very much like that. Like the beginning of the game and the end game are actually they're relatively simple and there are a relatively small number of decisions to make, and generally those opening moves are really well understood, and the closing moves are really well understood. So most good players will play the same moves in the same situations in the opening and the closing. It's the middle part of the game that's the really difficult part, and that's where the edges are gained and lost. And a blunder at that stage of the game can make a massive difference, can make a massive impact. So that's where it's most important to compare what a player is doing to what the solvers are suggesting that a player should do.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that is one approach that can also be applied to poker. You can partner, for example, with the makers of solvers, GTO Wizard, for example. We have a partnership with them where we collaborate on this kind of challenge. This is one tool in the toolbox, and the rest is really cutting edge and proprietary, and I don't want to talk about it really, but we do have some really good so we have some good tools in the toolbox, and we have some really interesting high potential ones on the way as well.
Planning on making any changes? What about WPT, like the live poker settings of WPT? Are you gonna like make some following this event in WSOP? Are you making any changes to how that's being run? And perhaps you could provide some insight on what makes those events stand out.
So I'm not responsible for the WPT live events. We are kind of close friends with the WPT, if you like, and we talk to them a lot. We obviously collaborate with them quite closely. I catch up with Adam, who's the CEO of the WPT, quite frequently. And I know that the big event to look forward to this year is the WPT World Championship, which will be at the start of December. And now we've not announced all the details of that yet, so I can't reveal them on this podcast, unfortunately. But you should definitely watch the space, because it's going to be a great event again. Last year the guarantee was $40 million. Didn't quite hit the guarantee. It was about $2 million short. We got some last minute competition, as some people may know, and that probably didn't help. This year it's going to be special. It's going to be really special. That's all I was.
Well, did you pay out the $2 million difference?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it's a guarantee. What's the point in saying guarantee if you're not going to pay it out?
Well, the reason why I asked that is because, I mean, it would have been awkward if you said no, but if you did, like, some people pay that out, but see, like, that's important, because it's not that obvious that it's paid out, because there's plenty of operators that don't pay that shit out. It is usually the struggling ones, to be fair, but yeah, like, it's important to pay out the guarantee. That's why it's a guarantee.
So we're trying to. I mean, look, I don't want to speak too much for the WPT here, but we have this vision, right, which we share with WPT. This is something we've discussed, and our vision is to make poker players' dreams come true, right? And that has a number of implications in the direction that we take our business and the things that we try and do. But if we're genuinely saying we want to make poker players' dreams come true, how does that possibly fit with being stingy and keeping that $2 million, cutting corners? It doesn't.
Well, you're right. I mean, this is where like, you're supporting the players' dreams so that players can see, okay, you're supporting their dreams. We're gonna go there. This is how things should work. This is like the way of, like, this is the right way. This is the order of natural things, not the other way where it's like, oh, we promise a bunch of shit, but it's not real. That's all bullshit, right? But this is the right way.
It has to be real. Players should feel special, valued. They should have the best possible experience. And everything. I've actually not been to the World Championship yet. I'm going this year, and I can't wait, because everything I've heard about it so far has been spectacular. Everyone who goes there comes back raving, and whatever capacity they go in, whether they're working for us and they're supporting our players there, whether they're working with one of our media partners, or whether they're playing in the event, everybody comes back saying they had the best time, and it was the best event that they played all year. So I can't wait for it.
Cool. That's great news. Is there anything else you'd like to mention about these events or WPT Online before we wrap things up?
What I would say is that if you're interested in qualifying for an event like the WPT World Championship, then the best place to do it is on WPT Global. We have a system called WPT Passport Dollars, where essentially you can build up a bankroll of WPT dollars, passport dollars, which you can use in any WPT event that you want. And in the lead up to the World Championship this year, there will be some incredible value ways to qualify for that event. There's going to be a lot of value, a lot of overlay on the cards over the next few months. You really shouldn't miss it. It's going to be great.
All right, cool. That is actually quite good news, because I do think that I think the satellites are both good opportunities to travel, and I think they're great value personally. I think people play terrible in satellites. Yeah. So, anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think no. One more thing, which is, I've said a lot of stuff on this podcast, right? And
yeah,
I kind of want people to call me out if they don't feel like I'm delivering the things that I've promised on.
Shit, what's accountability? Oh, look at that.
No, I'm serious, because one of the reasons that I'm engaging with the community, I'm getting out there, I'm putting my name out there as president of this company, is because I want people to know what's special about this business, but I also want to know if what you're experiencing is not what we're promising, right? I want to be able to solve problems like that for you if you're a WPT Global player. So please look, I'm not coming on this podcast to just bullshit. I want to know if things aren't like what I say. So please reach out to me. You can do it through our customer support team. You can do it on Twitter, and we will share my contact details as part of this podcast, so that you can do that.
All right, cool guys. Any feedback if Alex is not supporting the players or the poker world enough? Let us know. Let Alex know. He's trying to make a difference. I can see it, and it's real shit. Real change. That's the fabled real change is real.
Cool. Thanks, Dan.